Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just No HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, They Broke Into His House. A good friend of mine inherited his grandparents' old house. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are members of the HOA, and are here for him to sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude, and tried to get into the garage without so much as asking. When my friend stopped him, the man had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage, if everything there is in order. I have a right to do this bi-weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." My friend had enough of their audacity and kicked them out of the house. One of the board members shoved some papers into his face and told him he needed to sign this right now. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were ridiculous, and gave the HOA rights that were simply unreal. For example, they had a right to visit your home bi-weekly. You had to mow your lawn every week. Snow had to be shoveled every 2 hours when it snowed, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. You could not park more than one car on your grounds, except inside the garage, and a ton of other drama. A few days later they came back, and asked him why he did not sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time he would not even let them in, and told them he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them that meant war. Within a week they had sent him fines north of $1,000, several of which were for denying them access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them serious, and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day when they went extremely too far. One of the board members broke into his garage, stood in it and was writing things down on his notepad. But that was not even the worst part. He had 2 wonderful oak trees in the front of the house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents, when they were newlyweds and moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. One was already so damaged it was just a stump that was left. The other one they had just started with. My friend absolutely lost it. He told the tree crew to stop right then and there, and explained to them that he was the owner, and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea, since the board member claimed these trees were in violation of the rules. He told them he would overlook them trespassing, if they would be witnesses in court for him. Then he called the cops on the board members for trespassing, breaking and entering. They actually had used a bolt cutter to get into the garage. The process must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock in the tree, which was worth a ton of money, north of $50,000 if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair, and tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional $10 to $15K in lawyers and court costs. All in all, this trial must have cost them over $120,000. Then he went to yet another civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much these trees meant to him, since his great-grandparents had planted them, with seeds from the home country. He really laid it on as thick as he could. Plus he felt threatened by the HOA, and can hardly sleep, because he always fears they try to get into his house. The court actually bought it, and gave him $500,000 plus the costs for a state-of-the-art alarm system, so he can feel safe again in his own home. So put all together he cost the HOA nearly $750,000. They had to file for bankruptcy, and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. It gets better. The mediator found out that these 3 pricks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years, and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All 3 had to sell their houses, so they could pay out my friend. Now he is, for most people, one of the favorite people living there, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA. Next one is titled, Get Off My Lawn. I was once made to resod my front lawn. In the middle of summer with average daily temperatures over 100 degrees. During one of the worst droughts on record, all while the whole city was under watering restrictions. Per the contract homeowners sign when they buy their house, the fine for not resodding the lawn by a particular date was $100 per day until it was done. The new lawn, which I had spent several $100s on, promptly died, and they tried to make me replace it again, but apparently enough people had complained by that point that before I did they agreed not to make us replace our lawns until the water restrictions were lifted. Confession bear time. I had to get up early for work, 3 a.m. So as I drove through the neighborhood I looked for people watering their lawns in the middle of the night on violation of restrictions. Most people were just trying to avoid being hassled by the HOA, I know, so I left them alone. But when I saw members of the HOA board doing it, I reported them to the city. Next one is titled, HOA unfairly fines my aunt for not shoveling her sidewalk. Since it's winter in the northern hemisphere and we are getting our fair share of snow, I have a story from my aunt. My aunt lives in a gated community in the PNW, she's at a higher altitude so she gets a bit of snow. She is a nice lady, very active and always helps other people. Her HOA is a drinking club as she describes them, have a whole bunch of rules, some totally ridiculous, heavily enforced and always changing. Usually when rules are changed they get posted on some online community bulletin board from the days of dial-up. Also they like to fine and shame people. My aunt never attended meetings because she has no time for drinking and cigarettes. As per usual with a lot of bylaws you have to clear the sidewalk in front of your house of snow and ice. My aunt being the woman she is, and living in a 55+ community she always shovels her walk, and salts it for ice. A couple years ago there was a heavier than usual snowfall. Maybe over 20 inches in the higher elevations with some warm days then freezing temperatures for a few days after. So first snowfall she gets up early and shovels her sidewalk and her walk and sprinkles down some salt. It snows a few inches more so in the later afternoon she shovels the walk again and decides to salt again. She literally said she tossed a few handfuls of salt and the neighbor across the street comes running out demanding she stop salting and it's a violation of HOA rule whatever crap. It seems that a no salt rule was added to their book of great HOA rules. Reasoning is that salt crystals are unsightly, and posted on the unusable online bulletin board from 1999, which at this point the online bulletin board had been replaced by an under-maintenance error page for the past few months. So there was no way the drunken HOA rule changes could be relayed to the commoners. Well, my aunt apologizes, gets a warning for the first time she salted and a second for the handful of salt she applied in the second salting and then gets another warning for not properly clearing the sidewalk. Well, my aunt left maybe a strip about 2 to 3 inches for about 2 feet on the edge of her sidewalk which wasn't properly cleared of snow. Not a big deal, she made an excellent effort but the HOA neighbor didn't think so. Next violation would be a fine. Also she had to clean up all the rock salt with a broom. My aunt ended up getting the new HOA rules in writing from the HOA neighbor which she read over and realized they only stated salt in the sidewalk snow shoveling rule, but nothing that blue salt-free ice melt. Also was stated is that the sidewalk should stay free of ice at all times. Also she read a bit deeper to learn that street and sidewalk cleaning is covered by the HOA twice a year or as needed. Instead of risking HOA wrath of fines and some public shaming because now it's near impossible to prevent the sidewalk from freezing up, she decides she will challenge the vodka-induced reasoning of the HOA and will use the blue non-salt ice melt to keep her sidewalk ice-free. The next day after an overnight snowfall she heads to the local hardware store to buy some blue non-salt ice melt, strikes up a conversation with the shop owner about her issue who recommends these blue ice melting pellets and throws in a bag of clay kitty litter on the house so she can stick it to them idiots. That afternoon the temp rises just above freezing and there is a heavy wet snowfall of a few inches which hits the ground wet, melts and refreezes when temperatures go below freezing at nighttime. So instead of risking having a skating rink for a sidewalk, she clears the wet snow and then dumps a bunch of these blue ice melting pellets and a whole bunch of kitty litter. Overnight it freezes. Next day she has the most ice-free sidewalk in all of the neighborhood and it's covered in ice melt pellets. Well, it rains that day. Her use of kitty litter and blue ice melt pellets don't go unnoticed by HOA neighbor. That afternoon she is fined by the HOA officer in charge of fines for breaking rule #vodka section, stale cigarette smoke. She sees nothing wrong. The road is salted and sanded and looks like a mess, so her sidewalk doesn't look too bad, all blue and gray speckled and ice-free. Then gets a notice to clean up the salt, which she ignores because it's not salt she is using to de-ice her sidewalk, but blue salt-free ice melt pellets and clay kitty litter. Then that day it rained, then froze and continued to rain, then snow, causing everything to be covered in ice and snow the next morning. It was a disaster. My aunt cleared the snow from her sidewalk and applied more blue pellets and kitty litter, which wasn't a task because luckily she already had applied so much that there was already no ice on her sidewalk or snow. Everyone else in the neighborhood had to chip the under layer of ice after they risked a horrific fall while clearing the top layer of snow. She then was fined again, while neighbors had to actually walk in the messy street in some parts because sidewalks in some spot were unwalkable. Warnings and fines were given to other unsuspecting neighbors who couldn't attend the HOA booze meetings and had mistakenly used salt or had not chipped and cleared all the sidewalk ice in an acceptable amount of time. The next few days were blue skies and below freezing with ice everywhere. Sidewalks had been chipped but iced up over time with a thin layer of slick ice called black ice. People were falling and my aunt now had a couple rogue neighbors using all types of non-salt ice melt. One guy made a solution of brine and molasses which he sprayed on and got great results. Others used sand, brine, non-salt ice melters and even 15 gallons of wine which turned to vinegar was applied. The HOA's alcohol consumption probably increased as the officer fell on a patch of black ice out front of his home, breaking his elbow while returning from delivering fines, warnings and general nastiness. Eventually the weather returned to above freezing levels and rain which washed away all the various ice-melting substances. The rogue neighbors gathered at my aunt's house enjoying tea and snacks. Amongst them was the man who used brine and molasses, who happened to have a license to practice law and was retired with nothing else better to do than to ruin the drunk useless HOA at the next meeting. He then invited himself to the next meeting with a file folder of all the fines and warnings with a statement of dispute for each one. Also brought his tablet to prove the online bulletin board wasn't working, which helped the case that the HOA wasn't providing proper means of communication to the residents, which meant the residents could sign a petition to fire the standing HOA members and appoint an intermediate HOA till the election. My aunt was appointed treasurer, found the previous regime spent HOA funds at the liquor store, the retired lawyer president who then went after the previous HOA for funds spent on booze, and they lived happily ever after. Next one is titled, What We Get for $530 per Month. The title may be a little misleading, because $530 includes our utilities, and the HOA portion is considered to only be about 2/3 of that payment. The per month part is correct though. It should be noted that although that includes our utilities, the flat rate stays constant year-round. We have no air conditioning, no washer or dryer, and no television in the living room to be left on all day. On to what we get for that amount: squirrels in the wall. They've straight up told us there's no money in the budget to fix this. Potholes so large, the parking lot has become one lane as cars pull off to the side to wait for the only safe path to be clear. Dog shit everywhere, residents' fault, but management doesn't follow up. Furniture and mattresses in the dumpsters at any given time, see above reason. They've closed the hot tub permanently, demolished damaged carports, not to be replaced, and placed a gate at the most convenient entry-exit point that doesn't open except for emergency vehicles. What used to be a 100-yard drive straight out to a light to go left onto the main road is now a pothole-filled meandering nightmare with 2 extra long stoplights. The entire situation is our fault, and we're just between a rock and a hard place. We can't move for reasons. Oh, we also have about 6 roof leaks. We're told to deal with it until it's our building's turn for replacement. It's a condo. Our location is desirable, but the complex is in such a bad state that we have been on the local news a couple of times for HOA drama. My dream is that they will just condemn and some developer will come along and bulldoze the whole place and compensate us for our meager balance. Now I'm grumpy thinking about it all. It's actually a lot more in-depth and worse than this wall of text. It's a running joke within our social circle, and we have a long-standing tension with the management company that includes me documenting everything with photos and keeping email exchanges instead of dealing by phone. It sucks that even after we've learned our lesson, we will still be punished for life. Last one is titled, "Neighbor Wants to Start an HOA, I Laughed at Her." This happened late last summer, but since I just found out about this subreddit, you get the story now. On a cool-ish evening late last summer, I watched from my front porch as a woman with a clipboard walked from house to house. I figured she was selling something. When she got to my door, she told me that she was trying to start a neighborhood HOA in order to protect our property and make sure things stay neat and clean. I've been an amateur radio operator for the last 30 years, and 20 years ago I learned what hell there is for radio operators. It's only been in the past 10 years or so that the FCC made a ruling that allowed amateurs to put up antennas, but HOAs still make it very difficult. So I had read about a lot of trouble that amateur radio has had with HOAs and how these tin pot tyrants let a little power go to their head. I just laughed at her. Then I told her, no thanks. She seemed upset. Maybe she thought she had someone on her side since my yard looks so nice all the time. Maybe she didn't see the 30-foot dipole antenna wire hanging off of my backyard tree? Thanks for listening.